Two types of dead animals and two types of bloods have been made lawful for us. So if a person was to eat kosher meat, that is permissible, it is allowed. Locust and fish, they do not make the water impure.
وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهديه الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Today then we begin with the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar رضي الله عنهما قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أحلت لنا ميتتان ودمان فأما الميتتان فالجراد والحوت وأما الدمان فالكبد والطحال. أخرجه أحمد وابن ماجه وفيه ضعف. In this narration of Ibn Umar, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, two types of dead animals and two types of bloods have been made lawful for us. The two types of dead animals are locusts and fish, while the two types of bloods are the liver and spleen. The liver and spleen. So in this hadith then, firstly, it does mention at the end that there is some weakness in it. فيه ضعف لسبب في ذلك وهو أنه من رواية عبد الرحمن بن زيد بن أسلم عن أبيه عن ابن عمر وعبد الرحمن بن زيد بن أسلم متروك الحديث. And the reason why there is weakness in this narration is because of a particular narrator in the chain of narration, and that is Abdul Rahman, the son of Zayd, the son of Aslam, who narrates from his father, who narrates from Ibn Umar. And this Abdul Rahman is not from the reliable narrators, and his narrations were not taken كما يقول الإمام أحمد, just as Imām Ahmad said. However, Shaykh Al-Fawzan does highlight يشهد له أدلة أخرى من القرآن والسنة, that there are other evidences in the Quran and the Sunnah that back up what this hadith says. There are other evidences that do support and back up what this narration is saying. In the Quran there are ayat, and in the Sunnah there are ahadith. لأن حل حيتان البحر دل عليه الحديث السابق. As for saying that the fish of the ocean are permissible to eat, even the dead ones, i.e. you don't need to necessarily slaughter them, you don't need to slaughter them, they don't have to be slaughtered. That was already mentioned in a previous narration. In fact, it was the first narration that the animals of the sea are permissible. Al-hillu maytatuh. So that is evidenced in that narration, for example. Similarly, in the Quran, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, number 96, أحل لكم صيد البحر وطعامه متاعا لكم وللسيارة. أحل لكم صيد البحر. The prey, what you capture from the sea, is halal for you. It is halal, the fish that you take out from the sea. So these types of narrations, they indicate the permissibility of fish without needing the slaughtering. And as for the locusts, because the narration also says you can eat locusts that are dead, i.e. that you don't need to slaughter them before eating them, there is a narration too, فَدَلَّ الْحَدِيث الصَّحِيحِ عَلَى حِلِّهِ. There is an authentic narration in Al-Bukhari, for example, that highlights the permissibility of eating locusts without having to slaughter them first. And that is the narration of Ibn Abi Awfa, غزونا مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم 6 غزوات أو 7 غزوات نأكل الجراد. He said that we went and fought alongside the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam 6 or 7 battles. 6 or 7 battles we were out with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, fighting alongside him, and we used to eat. When out there in those battles, traveling, etc., we used to eat locusts. It mentions that they used to eat the locusts. فهذا دليل على حل الجراد وهو يشهد لحديث ابن عمر هذا. So that is an evidence upon locusts. So even though the narration we have at hand has weakness in it, there are other narrations that support the meaning of it. So we have authentic narrations supporting the fact that fish are permissible to eat without slaughtering. We have narrations indicating the permissibility of locusts also. ثم إن هذا الحديث أيضا تكلم فيه من ناحية أخرى، وهو أنه روي مرفوعا كما أورده المصنف، وروي موقوفا على ابن عمر. وأجاب أهل العلم عن هذا، فقال ابن القيم في زاد المعاد: هذا حديث حسن، وهذا الموقوف في حكم المرفوع، لأن قول الصحابي أحل لنا وحرم علينا كذا ينصرف إلى إحلال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وتحريمه. There is another issue here too, and that is whether this hadith we have with us now, the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar, is it actually a hadith, i.e. connected up to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that it was his statement, or is it mawquf, meaning it was the statement of Abdullah ibn Umar himself? Was it a statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or is it the statement of Abdullah ibn Umar himself? The scholars, they mentioned, like Ibn al-Qayyim, that even if the chain of narration stops at Ibn Umar and it's the statement of Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma, it doesn't matter, because this narration, it has the ruling of being from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even if the chain of narration stops at Ibn Umar. How come? Because this is one of those types of narrations whereby the companion could not have given that statement from his own ijtihad. Ibn Umar couldn't have just made ijtihad and said fish are okay, locusts are okay, spleen and he couldn't have made these rulings, this fatwa, just from ijtihad himself. So the scholars, they say it is such a hadith that the content of it could only have come from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The rulings in it, the statements in it, they could have only come from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That is not something any of the companions would have made ijtihad on themselves. So sometimes you can have these narrations that are statements of the companions, but they are given the ruling of being from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because those statements are such that they could not be independent ijtihad from the companion himself. So in this case, that is what we have. It cannot be said here that this was just ijtihad from Ibn Umar, Rather, he must have learnt this ruling from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what is it that we actually have in this narration then? What is the fiqh that is actually being mentioned here? At the beginning it says then, أُحِلَّتْ لَنَا مَيْتَتَانِ, that two types of dead animals are permissible for us. Normally the ruling is that dead animals are impermissible. You cannot eat an animal that has died by itself. You can only eat an animal that has died because you have slaughtered it. When you slaughter an animal, sacrifice an animal, and it dies, that's halal to eat. But if the animal dies by itself somewhere, not because of you sacrificing it, then you can't eat that animal. It's haram. You go into the forest and you find a dead rabbit, you can't go now and try and sacrifice it. It's already dead. So it's haram to eat. But if you catch something and you sacrifice it yourself, now it's halal. So the normal ruling is dead animals that have already died, haram, you can't eat them. You have to have got the animal live and sacrificed it yourself. But there are exceptions to that. It says in the narration there are two types of animals that you can eat without having to sacrifice them. They could already be dead. And what are those two? It mentions here Maytatan, two types of the dead animals that have not been slaughtered Islamically, which are normally haram, as we've said, by the evidence of the Quran, by the way. It is in the Quran that an animal which is already dead and you haven't sacrificed it is haram. That is in the Quran. For example, in Al-Ma'idah, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةِ, the dead animals are haram upon you. Animals that have died by themselves, you haven't sacrificed them. The ayah in the Quran tells you it is haram. In An-Nahl also 115, إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةِ, that indeed Allah has made the dead animals haram upon you. So the original ruling, the default ruling in Islam is dead animals that you haven't sacrificed, they are haram. However then, what is mentioned here is that there are two types that are permissible. So this narration is basically specifying the general ruling. Generally haram dead animals. Here though, we now have a specific ruling about certain animals that are okay. And they are the locust, استثنى منها ميتة الجراد وميتة الحيتان. The locusts, the dead locusts, and the dead fish. فالجراد لا يحتاج إلى ذكاة. So the locusts, they don't need slaughtering before you can eat them. You find some dead locusts, or you employ some method of catching them that kills them in the process. Before you get them and slaughter them, you don't need to slaughter them. That process of you catching them, it kills them, or some other method kills them, they are permissible to eat without the need to slaughter. وَكَذَلِكَ الْحُوتِ, and similarly fish. You have some method of fishing, in that process the fish die perhaps, no problem, they can be eaten. It does not require that they have to be slaughtered. سواء مات بسبب كأن قذفه البحر أو أصابه مرض أو مات في البحر. And it's irrelevant as to how or why they died. Could have died for whatever reason, those animals, but the locust and the fish are permissible. They do not need slaughtering. It could even be that those animals die in the process of your cooking. So maybe those locusts, as they are boiled or they are cooked, and obviously they die then they are died, they have died, and they are permissible to eat. It is not a slaughtering that is needed. The animals where a slaughtering is needed, which is the basic default ruling that you have to slaughter animals, what is the Islamic way of slaughtering animals? The Islamic way of slaughtering animals, then basically you can summarize it in 3 rules. 3 rules regarding slaughtering, sacrificing Islamically. The first is that the actual person who's doing the sacrifice and the slaughtering has to meet the condition of being someone who is allowed to slaughter Islamically. And who is that? Muslim or a person of the book. Jews and Christians, their slaughterings are permissible. So the actual person who slaughters the animal has to be Muslim or Jew or Christian. Slaughterings of others are not permissible for a Muslim to eat. Sacrificing of others are not permissible for a Muslim to eat. But the sacrificing of the Muslim, of course, and the Jews and the Christians is permissible to eat. That is allowed. And that is halal. It is okay. That is allowed. So if a person was to eat kosher meat, that is permissible. It is allowed. A person was to eat meat from a Christian source, that is allowed. It is permissible. The second condition or the second rule when it comes to slaughtering is the tool or the item used to slaughter with. The actual knife or the tool that is used to slaughter with, it must be sharp. And it must cut the animal, sacrifice, slaughter the animal because of its sharpness, not because of pressure. If you had a very, very blunt knife, extremely blunt, it's just a blob of metal, barely any blade left to it. If you took that type of a blade, if it can still be called a blade, and put it to the neck of a chicken, for example, and you push down, it may not actually cut into it. But you're pushing down, you're trying, it's so blunt, the chicken dies from suffocation or something. That is incorrect. The blade has to be sharp that it actually cuts into the animal. Not that it's blunt and you're having to push down to get it into the animal. Should be a sharp tool that cuts into the animal. Basically meaning that it cuts in because of its sharpness, not because of pressure. If your blade is so blunt that you have to push down to get it to cut in, that isn't the right type of blade to use in sacrificing then. Should be a sharp one that cuts straight in with barely any pressure. Then the third condition as well is, what do you actually have to cut? What do you actually have to cut for that sacrificing to be correct? You must cut, or let's say there are 4 main parts or sections within the throat. There are 4 main sections. Anybody here with biology background, medical background? Put your hands up. There you go. So, the food tube, which is known as the esophagus. The breathing tube, trachea. And then you have the 2 big blood vessels, basically jugular. So now you have 4 main tubes. 4 main tubes through that neck. You are supposed to cut through those 4 tubes. The blade should go through the 4 tubes. Some scholars, they allow and they say it is still a correct sacrifice as long as the blade goes through 3 out of the 4 main tubes. If the blade goes through 3 out of the 4 main tubes, and you don't get to the 4th one, your blade goes through 3 and you stop, and it's bleeding out, as long as you've gone through 3 of the main tubes, then many of the scholars say that's okay, it's still correct. If you cut and you only manage to go through 2 of the main tubes, then that is a very problematic area. Is that accepted as an Islamic slaughtering or not? Now there is a big issue with that. So, to be on the safe side and to do it properly, you should cut through all 4 of the main tubes. But at the minimum, you need to go through 3 of the main tubes for that to be legitimate. So the Shaykh, he mentions here that you have al-wadjan wal-hulqum or al-mar'i wal-wadjan عرقان في جانبي العنق يجري منهما الدم. That you have the 2 main blood vessels, the 2 big blood vessels going down through the neck. Then you have also the tube that you breathe with. And then you also have the tube which is for the food. 4 main tubes. For the breathing, for the food, and the 2 main big blood tubes. In simple terms. From those 4 then it mentions هذه أربعة إذا قطعت كلها فإن هذا ذكاة بإجماع أهل العلم. If you cut all 4 of those from the animal, then by consensus that is a legitimate slaughtering. أما إذا قطع بعضها فهذا محل تفصيل عند العلماء. If you don't manage to cut all 4, you only get through some of them, then you have the differences that begin to arise. So some of them say أنه إذا قطع 3 من هذه الأربعة فالذكاة صحيحة. That as long as you get through 3 of the tubes out of the 4 of that animal, then it's a legitimate sacrificing. كأن يقطع الحلقوم والمرء وأحد الوجدين. For example, you cut the breathing tube, to make it simple, the eating tube, and one of the main blood vessel tubes. Then that would be a legitimate slaughtering, 3 out of the 4. If you don't manage even 3, like we said, you only manage 2. You only get through 2 of the tubes in your cutting and you stop and you think you've done it. You've only done 2 of it. You haven't gone through them all properly. Then you have major differences between the scholars. Some of them, for example, Ash-Shafi'i and Ahmad, in one narration, they say that you must cut the food and the air tubes. The food and the air tubes must be cut. And in another narration it mentions that the jugulars must be cut. So you have differences when you only manage 2. So that is a problematic area. Minimum should be cutting 3 of them, and to have no doubt about it, the proper sacrifice, do all 4 of them in the animal, and then it's by agreement of the scholars. That is the first 3 conditions. Then there is a 4th. I think we said 3 before, but 4. There are 4 rules. We mentioned earlier 3, but actually 4. Those are the first 3, that the person doing it must be legitimate, i.e. Muslim, or from the people of the book, Jew or Christian, that the tool that is used must be sharp and cut because of its sharpness, not because of blunt force and pressure. And thirdly, that you must cut through the 4 vessels, or at least 3 of them, for that to be legitimate. What is the 4th rule? When sacrificing, slaughtering, saying the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, saying the name of Allah upon that slaughtering. And that is a condition mentioned by many of the scholars, by most of the scholars, that you have to have the mentioning of the name of Allah upon doing that slaughtering. So if these conditions are there, then your slaughtering, your sacrifice is legitimate. And if they are missing, if any of these conditions are missing, then that sacrifice is not legitimate. So for example, if it wasn't a Muslim or the people of the book, it was some other person, some other mushrik religion, some other religion of shirk, some other mushrik upon that type of religion, then in that case it would not be legitimate. It would not be legitimate. For example, if you only cut one of the vessels, then it wouldn't be legitimate. So those are the conditions to make it legitimate for the normal slaughtering. The point here is, for locusts and fish, that slaughtering is not required. You don't have to cut the fish or the locusts. You can directly put them into the pot, boil them, cook them, however you're going to cook them, and eat them straight away. Does not require that they need to be slaughtered. There are a few small differences about this topic. Some of the scholars, they mention a few small differences. Like for example, some of the scholars, they say that with the locusts, they do have to die with some causality. That maybe you catch them and boil them so they die because of that. Or the method you catch them in causes them to die. That's all good. But if you just find it on the floor dead, some of the scholars say not like that. Some say that. But the hadith doesn't indicate that necessarily. The hadith indicates they are permissible to eat whether you find them dead already or they die because of your actions of catching them and cooking them. Some of them say it's only allowed if those locusts and fish die because of your actions of catching them, cooking them, etc. Not that you already find them dead on the floor. But that isn't the strongest opinion. The strongest opinion is either way. Those animals, whether you find them dead or you catch them and they die, they are permissible to eat without the need for slaughtering. With the fish, some of the scholars, they mention things like, if you find a fish dead floating on the surface of the sea, you can't eat that one. But again, the same kind of ruling, it doesn't matter whether you find it floating on the surface of the sea or elsewhere in the sea, it is all permissible to eat. That is the correct opinion regarding that. Then the second section of this hadith mentions another point, and that is the point regarding the two types of bloods that have been made lawful for us, and they are the liver and the spleen. The liver and the spleen, they have been made permissible to eat. Wallahu ta'ala harram ad-dam, and that is because normally the default is those interior blood, everything is impermissible. It's the meat that you eat, not those bloods. It's mentioned in the Quran, إِنَّمَا حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمُ الْمَيْتَةَ وَالدَّمَ, that Allah has made the dead animals and the blood impermissible. And so this indicates that all types of this spilt blood, when you slaughter an animal and then you open it up, everything, the organs, it all falls out. Everything then comes out and you strip that animal. Normally that isn't eaten. The blood and everything which comes isn't eaten. However, there are exceptions that are being made here from that. The norm is that the blood which comes out of that animal when you slaughter it, it is considered impure and it's haram by consensus of the scholars. As for the bit of blood that is left in the meat, even when you buy chicken now, you open it up, there may be some little red section where you can tell that's clearly a little clot of blood there. You get little pieces of blood, little amounts of blood left inside of the meat. That's not a problem. That isn't a problem, that isn't an issue. But the majority of the blood of the body, when you sacrifice the animal, has to be drained out. نعم وكانوا يرون الدم خطوطا في الماء ولم يأمرهم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بغسله ولا شك بأن إزالة الدم المتبقي فيها عنة ومشقة. So that bit of blood that remains within the meat inside of it, it's very difficult to get all of that out, and that isn't an issue. But here then, what are the two types of the internal blood which are permissible? It's mentioned as the liver and as the spleen. الدم الأول دم الكبد والدم الثاني دم الطحال فهما مستثنيان من عموم قوله تعالى حرمت عليكم الميتة والدم. ويستفاد من هذا الحديث عدة مسائل. So the liver and the spleen, they are permissible to be eaten. And so this narration, it highlights to us a number of points. What are the conclusions we can derive from this narration? The conclusions are, firstly, that it is impermissible to eat dead animals that haven't been slaughtered. It is impermissible to eat dead animals that haven't been slaughtered. And that is something which is agreed upon by the scholars. Agreed upon by the scholars. Whereas this narration now highlights an exception to that rule, which is the locusts and fish. Also, what we learn from this is that if the fish and the locusts die, they do not become impure. They do not become impure. And that is perhaps the reason why the author is mentioning that here. فإنه لا يتنجس بخلاف ما إذا مات فيه حيوان بري كالغنم والإبل فإنه إذا مات فيه فإنه ينجس. أما ما ليس فيه دم كالحشرات والخنافس أو ما يطلق عليه الفقهاء ما لا نفس له سائلة فهذا إذا مات في الماء فإنه لا ينجسه لأنه ليس فيه دم. The point of this, we're in the chapter of purification. If you have a bowl of water now and you're going to make wudu from it and you come one day and you find a dead locust in it, is that bowl of water impure now? No, it's not, because it's permissible to eat the locust. How could it be permissible to eat if it was impure? So that water hasn't become impure. You have a bowl of water one day, you come and somebody's put some dead fish into it without realizing. Can you still get them out and use that bowl of water? You can't. They're not impure. Fish and locusts are not impure. If you had a bowl of water and outside somewhere and one day you notice, you come and there's a dead sheep that's fallen and it's gone into that bowl as well. Now it's impure because sheep and those animals haven't been made exceptions. But locust and fish, they do not make the water impure. That is the point of mentioning the narration in this chapter. Also, we learned the impermissibility of the blood. You don't drink the blood as some of the people upon deviation in their minds and intellects do. You do not drink that blood. That blood is poured out from the animal and the insides are gutted. It is gutted, as you say. And then the rest of the meat is eaten. But also you have the exception here regarding the blood of the liver and the spleen. So the point though here is about purification. And that purification is regarding the fact that the locusts and the fish do not bring about impurity. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll carry on next week with the hadith which follows. And that is the hadith regarding the fly. If a fly falls into your drink, into your cup, then what is the ruling? If a fly falls in. We'll begin with that next time. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.